Want to do mono first?
Sure.
Yeah.
Get ready to say everything we ever said at the monologue meetings. Cancel time.
Behind the Nazis, take 2.
Yesterday was daylight savings time when, daylight savings time when we lose an hour for no apparent reason. Yeah. By the way, losing an hour for no apparent reason is also the motto for this show. We've always... Hey, Conan O'Brien here, Andy Richter, for another edition of Behind the Nonsense, where we look behind the scenes. Today we're going to focus a little bit on the monologue process, specifically the meetings that we would have just before the show would tape, figure out which jokes to do, and often it was a very chaotic and hilarious mess, that meeting. Joining me, Laurie Kilmartin, hilarious comedy writer. Brian, Kiley, occasionally, no, always hilarious. You're no Kilmartin, but you're good. I don't know what to say, but we get into this very small room, and this went on for years and years and years.
And it's your dressing room.
My dressing room.
So it's your space.
It's my space. We're getting ready. The audience is just on the other side of the wall, sometimes loading in, sometimes the band is playing. We're getting very close to showtime. And time is of the essence, and we're looking through a big stack of jokes, and then absolute inappropriate foolishness. Well, you describe it,
yes,
Laurie.
I think it's so interesting that to get to the place where you can tell these really clean jokes on television, you have to go to a place where you're just saying unrepeatable things in the green room just to get yourself there.
You've just identified what it is. Laurie and Brian are both very good, excellent stand-up comedians. You guys understand something about this performing process.
I'm pretty stressed out. I have a 10-year-old son, and already at age 10, we've had multiple discussions on masturbation etiquette at 10 years old. I was like, please do not knock on mom's door when she's masturbating.
There is something about needing to stretch it all the way out here to then pull it back to here. So the jokes would be, jokes that you can tell on television about the president or a celebrity or what happened in the news today. You would push me, I would push you, we would stretch it way out and be doing entire riffs that...
Talk about canceled.
The whole point was that you were going to be really clean in about 5 minutes. And that's what was so hilarious.
But it's also, too, I always look at it as like, we ran an opium den for tourists, and we could only get off on the really hard stuff. Go ahead, have this weak sauce, but for us, I gotta put poison right in my veins before I feel anything.
I remember one of the first meetings out here, Andy was late, and you guys got in a fake yelling argument of, where were you? I was around the corner. Around the corner, fudge is made. And it became this whole about what was that rhyme and what, and we had to Google. But it's 20 minutes
We had to Google it.
And then it's like 2 minutes to do the jokes because we were discussing
And again,
lemonade.
band playing, every second is precious. We're supposed to get out there and do this show, but we would get started
on Milk Lemonade.
Milk Lemonade around the corner. And Brian, you go back to 93 or early 94?
94, yeah.
Okay, so you're, really pretty much a lifer. You came on the show and you didn't really know what to expect, and you thought, well, Conan's probably this erudite. Like, all you knew is that, he went to a good college.
Absolutely. It's like, he's this Harvard guy, whatever. And then it was like, oh my God, this is total insanity.
But I remember we had a meeting where we were talking about jokes, and I said one thing, but then I pretended.
You had a candle there for some reason, and you lit the candle, and then you had a bottle of scotch, and you pretended to knock the candle over in the scotch, and then you pretended to catch on fire, and then you were going out the window, and somehow the curtain wrapped around your neck. It was like this long...
And then I hung myself as I burned, and I acted it all out, and Brian's sitting there, and this has nothing to do with the show. And then you got a very different idea of...
It was like my first day, and I'm like, okay, this is not what I was expecting.
This is not going to be Dick Cavett.
And I remember also there was one of my first days, we were trying to decide between this joke or that joke, and you stopped somebody in the hall and said, what do you think of this joke on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the funniest, 2 not being funny, 3 being funny again, and then you just went all the way
I made it super complicated. It was an intern. The intern was like, wait, what's 4? No, there is no 4. There's 3 and then 5. 5 is great, but 4 is off limits, and 3 is no good. And
what I love, too, is that at the beginning of that, you really wanted an answer, but then you discovered, like, oh, no, there's this other thing that I want much more, which is to fuck with this kid, you know.
I want to really have a good time.
Yeah.
Your laugh is so fantastic. And just
fantastic.
Yeah. The Kilmartin cackle, we'd call it. But we would be inappropriate, and then you would like push us much farther sometimes. I remember that very clearly.
Yes,
like,
for sure. We were always grateful when someone was saying earlier, Gavin Polone would stop in because he
God.
also had a great laugh. And
Yeah.
sometimes we knew the mono wasn't like our best effort. And it's like, please God, let Gavin be there today and save some.
Yeah, Gavin's
jokes.
my manager, and he would come by, always wearing a tracksuit, a full tracksuit, head to toe.
Matching, yeah.
Matching tracksuit, but he's got a really good sense of humor, and he'd sit there and he would laugh really hard, and the rest of us get so jaded, like, there's not a lot of laughter in that room.
Yeah.
And then Gavin would come in, and then he would usually try and think of some money-making scheme. He would say, you could take that joke, and you could try and make it a sitcom, and then I could produce it. And we're like, shut up!
After a while working on a show like this, there is a lot of like, oh yeah, that's really funny. You know, you don't laugh at things, but you're like, oh yeah, that's really funny.
Gavin and Sona often save jokes.
Yes.
Well, Sona, my assistant, God love her, she was a good laugher, but she really liked jokes that had weed in them.
Dick jokes.
Sure. Dick jokes.
Yeah, she liked
and she'd be like, ha! And I'd be like, no, I'm not gonna. And you guys would say, like, see, it's worth doing it.
Our crowd.
See, the guy had too much weed, and then his dick got big. And I'm like, that's not a joke. And she'd be like, ha ha ha, weed and dick. And then, of course, my manager would be like, actually, what we could do is market something. We could market something that makes your penis larger using marijuana.
Our jokes could never compete with the riffs. That was the problem.
In the room.
You'd do Blue Kiley or something and kill, and then we'd go to the jokes, and I was like...
I would spend 20 minutes doing an impression of Brian Kiley.
We always called my grandfather Poppy because of his opium addiction.
I can impersonate Brian Kiley doing his jokes and his mannerisms, and it's very, I would do this routine where it's Kiley in a club going incredibly blue, filthy blue, I can't even say it right here, but just imagine.
The dirtiest thing you've ever heard.
The dirtiest thing that Red Fox ever said times 10, and it's Kiley doing that and killing, and then riding home in his tiny little conservative car, and then reading a Truman biography in his bed, and then getting called to go back to the club.
Yeah.
And so I'm with my old lady, and I told her you've got to wash that ass. Wash that ass. If I'm going to go down there and service you in that area, you need to clean that fucking ass. You see. I don't know why that stuff we would do it. We'd be crying, and then I was like, all right. Let's go do this TV show. Yeah.
There's a new trend where people watch television that they despise, and it's called hate watching. Hate watching, yeah. Speaking of hate watching, hi, Mom.
All right, well, you get an idea of what we were talking about. I never want to see either of you again.